But what I remember about Ike and Salt was the fact that Don, my cousin Don, would stay with us, and when Ike came to visit we had a family thing, came to visit, and we noticed that Ike was always salting before he tasted it. Food. It was a thing about him. He would always put lots of salt out first. So we did is we salted the food before he got there. Really salted it before he got there. And then warned him, don't put salt on it. Of course, he completely ignored us. And he put salt on it, but he couldn't not eat it because we made such a big fuss about it. So we got a big kick out of that one. Because we were kids and we are kind of like that, like. So how'd you learn how to eat salt?
I don't really eat much salt. I don't put salt on anything.
Is that a response to your father's
I
salting?
don't. No, I was not aware. Actually, I was not really aware that he did that.
Really?
No. I never really watched him eat.
Well, what family would you grow up in?
So, okay, let me ask first. As I said, I knew there were lots of tensions between the brothers. What? Let me hear about it from Ike's point of view.
From what I understood, is that he didn't talk to Hai for many years because at my brother's birth, Hai was supposed to take pictures of the bris, and he double exposed to film, and they and they didn't speak for 20 years.
Oh, God.
I swear to God, that's what we heard. Now, what did you hear, Darryl?
Okay. Well, let me tell you what I heard. Okay. But I heard Dad actually felt very guilty. Dad felt that he went out to work and he knew there was a lot of tension involved because everybody told me that the other brothers were mad at him because they felt that he deserted the family by going out, by not being part of their struggles with I guess it was Sadie then, wasn't it? Yeah. We've got to go back a little bit. Dad's mother died when he was around 12 or 13. And Ike was how old?
9.
Was 9. And their mother died. It was a tremendous shock to the family. And apparently it really disrupted the family a lot. And Dad didn't stay home and work with the kids. Instead, he went out and he worked. He went out to work at 13. And so he wasn't home.
What did he do? What was he working at 13?
He didn't tell me. He may have been working with the furries. I'm not sure what he did, to be honest with you. I'm trying to think what he could have done. He probably was working in the shop with Benjamin. This would be my guess. And because Benjamin, Dad's father, was a workaholic, and he was not people oriented at all. He was workaholic and work oriented, and only worked with furs. And so my guess is that Dad knew a lot about furs, so Dad probably went to work for him, but he wasn't at home, and he knew that the brothers were really resented that. So Dad was always defensive. Every time I asked him about his life, he was defending himself of why he did what he did, in spite of the fact that it was something he shouldn't have done. That's what I remember. Do you have any memories of what?
Yeah, in terms of all I remember is that my father was a furrier. He was a furrier, and I guess Sam was also in the fur trade also, but he became involved with the union, and he had organized Benny's shop, and there was no love lost between them.
I never heard that. Who did it? Was your father that organized the shop?
Yeah, my father, Ike,
did the shop, organized the shop.
Organized his father's shop.
And his father was anti-union now.
Yeah.
And so that was a wonderful. What did Sam have to do with it?
Sam apparently was also involved with the union.
Oh, he was very much.
Yes,
so.
he was.
But I didn't realize he worked with Ike.
Now,
Yeah.
during the war, did your father serve in the war? I know Sam did.
No, my father had too many problems. His health problems, so he never went into the war.
It's like RF or something.
4F. It's 4F. Not. Yeah, it was probably 4F.
That's true with my father too.
Now Sam was there. I have pictures of Sam in his uniform. Now Dad didn't go in, and we had a family at the time, so he got deferred. But as the war went on, it got to where he couldn't get a deferment anymore. So he became a milkman, which is a critical job.
Oh wow!
And then the milkman, they were threatened to draft him anyway. So he went to work for the Navy. In the Navy, oh no, sorry, that was later. Then he went to work for an insulation company, Rockwell Insulation Company, doing something that would reduce the need for fuel. That was considered a very important job. So he got deferred for that one. He also got a gasoline allowance, which was very nice. And then they were going to draft him anyway, so he joined the Navy Yard. Went to the Navy Yard, and he worked in the Navy Yard. He never worked in the Navy Yard because they had a scheme where if you take a test, you pass the test, they train you for the next level up. Dad was very good at tests and wasn't very good at working. So he would take the test and he'd pass it very well, and they'd give him the next job up. But he didn't work at the job because they offered him another test. So Dad worked for the Navy Yard all the time. He learned a lot of stuff. He learned how to be an electrician. He learned how to operate the big saws. They operated a lot of stuff there, but he never really did anything for them. But we have pieces of stuff that he brought back from the Navy Yard. That was really great stuff. We have it at home. When I was a kid, we had earphones. I got to tell you a story. This is not. The public don't realize this. Today, when you're in a boat, in a warship, and the bridge wants to talk to the people in the engine room, you would think that in today's environment they pick up a phone, right? They didn't do that. In the old days, they also thought they used to have pipes, air pipes, but you could yell on an air pipe and they'd hear it over there. But in the Navy, the U.S. Navy, they had little earphone things that would work as a microphone or an earphone. They were fabulous. So Dad took a few. We had a few of them at home. And he gave it to me, who shared it with a friend of mine. We wired the whole house with these earphones. We were listening in on every room in the house. We could hear the voices going on in every room, and it would go down to a closet in the basement where we had all the little connections there, and we could listen to anybody in any room from these little earphones. That story that when at the last minute, just before the war ended, they started to draft him too. He's all getting ready to go. He's getting ready to sell the house and sell the car and everything like that, and the war was over. So that's what happened to me.
Yeah, I think your dad was ill, right?
Well, he always had an ulcer problem.
Yeah, remember that.
Yeah, I'm facing. Okay, he had an ulcer problem, but all I know is once I remember he would tell us that when he got his driver's license in New York, he had a job before he got his license, parking cars. Mm-hmm. And my father being a kidder,
yeah,
he drove the car to the. He threw. Okay, he drove to his own driving test, which they wouldn't permit him to take because
he drove there.
he drove there.
That's hysterical. That sounds like your father did that. Oh, Dad also drove a cab. My father drove a cab.
Okay, but now let's hear about you. How about Darryl? Well, let me chase Don first. Don, tell me about your relationship with your father.
That was very difficult. He was very busy. A little history about him. He came to Philadelphia in 1942, I think. The business agent for the Fur Workers Union. He was in the Fur Workers Union in New York. He worked for Ben Gold. I don't know if you're familiar with the name, Ben Gold. He was the head of the union. He was he was a communist. Most of them were at the time. Most of them were. And he was told by Ben to come to Philadelphia because the business agent in Philadelphia in early 40s went into the army. And they needed someone. He thought it was only going to be temporary. So he started out in Philadelphia as business agent, and the guy never came back, so he remained in Philadelphia for the rest of his life.
Mary, till break. You're getting audio when you read.
Huh?
You're reading the audio meters there. Make sure they're working, that's all. When we talk,
Okay, yeah.
When we talk, you should see the meters work.
Yes, I see the meters.
That's good. That's the way we check.
It's 1 meter. I don't.
One's good enough.
Okay, but
Yeah, so how about you though in that?
He was kind of more interested in the Fur Workers Union and social issues rather than his family. He was, I guess one could say that my parents were two people who should never had kids.
But you probably had some interaction with him.
Oh yeah, I had. Yeah.
Did you fight? Did you have?
No.
What did you do for fun?
All I remember is I didn't spend a lot of time with him because he was never really home. He spent a lot of time with the union stuff.
Right.
So I was basically, I brought up myself. I grew up without any help from them. They encouraged us, but I didn't interact very much. All I remember was that he was concerned about my handwriting, and he would look at my homework. If it wasn't written properly, it wasn't neat enough, I'd have to do it over again. That was one thing that...
Did he have good handwriting?
That I do not know.
Yeah, I wonder if he did or not.
Did you remember that video we had a copy of with your mother and your Aunt Rose Young, and you and everybody was laughing and happy, and you were so surprised to see that? Do you remember that video we should use?
I remember the video, but I don't remember that.
The camera did not hear her at all.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your
Tell me more
mom.
about the background of what that story's about. Her voice not being big.
No.
Okay. I guess what she's saying that you didn't think that my mother was very happy. She probably
You
wasn't.
didn't think she was happy.
I don't recall. I didn't really interact that much with them, but I know that during the war, my Uncle Sam, Rose's husband, was in the Navy, and she lived. We lived nearby, a couple blocks away, and my mother had a hard time dealing with twins. That was quite a burden, plus having an older sister who was only about 4 years old at the time. So she was very helpful in helping raise the two of us. But the sisters weren't close, and nor was my father with his family.
Well, what did you do for fun? Did you go to camp?
We went to camp.
Tell me about your camp experience.
We had our first camp we went to was part of the Fur Workers Union. It was White Lake Lodge, I believe it was. Okay. In the first years, I guess we were from 5 until about 7. Then we went to Wyandotte, which was in New York, and there was a outbreak of polio.
Oh.
And we came back. They closed the camp because of the outbreak, and we got gamma globulin, which was
Right. We know about it.
yeah.
Let's say on this.
Then at about when I guess I was about 9, we went to College Settlement Farm Camp. It was a Red Feather Agency camp.
Red Feather is what?
It's like a Red Cross kind of.
For needy kids.
For needy kids.
For needy kids. Okay.
Yeah, because both myself and my brother, we went there. It was very inexpensive. We went there for mainly all summer, so we didn't see our parents that much during the summer. And we were there, I guess, until we became junior counselors at the age of 15. I was there a couple more years until I turned 16 or 17. Then my camping experience was over. But we spent all summer there.
Can I add something?
Sure.
Yes, sure.
The counselors would take him bowling and would get him drunk.
No, I would get myself drunk.
Oh, okay.
How old were you then? Tell me about this.
I was 17.
Oh, you were
16, 17. I was yeah, well, as a junior counselor at the time, we were near Willow Grove Park, and they had a huge bowling alley. It was one of the largest in the areas, and they had a bar in the bowling alley, and it helped my bowling score considerably.
At least you thought they did.
Yeah. I had a good time there, actually. I enjoyed that.
So tell me, as an identical twin, what was your life like with your brother?
There was a great deal of competition.
What a surprise.
Yeah, isn't it though? But we were pretty comparable in terms of when we graduated high school. I think I was 7th or 8th, and he was 9th, something like that, out of a class of 450.
Wow.
So we did fairly well, but I never found high school very challenging. I found it fairly easy.
How'd you deal with your brother's sickness?
I was very upset. And I was actually the year that months, about a couple months before he died, when he had come back in August from I guess it was Romania.
Yeah.
He was there with his wife at the time, and they told him there that he had to come home because they couldn't treat him. And that was in July of I guess 70s.
He came back in. He was diagnosed in April of '76.
But
He
no,
was if I remember-
he was no.
melanoma of the blood.
He had, they never found it was melanoma, but they never found the primary site.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It was apparently what had happened is that his wife never went. They didn't go to medical doctors. They went to osteopathic doctors, and he had a beard, and it turned from reddish to white.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And the doctors gave him vitamins, and it turned back to the normal red. And that should have been a clue had he been a medical doctor.
And
but
they would have picked it up.
They could have picked it up at that time, but they never did.
Yeah, and that,
When he came back in July, it was July, because Diane was there during the summer months to do her dissertation research. He came back, and he was admitted to Hahnemann Hospital, and our mutual friend Darryl Freedman was his doctor. He was a pulmonary specialist. And I was supposed to, I guess a month before he died, or shortly before he died, I was to go down and he was going to get a blood transfusion, bone marrow transplant from me.
Because you're being identical twins, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, he died before that could happen.
he threw a blood clot.
Through a blood clot and died. And I guess that was December of
76.
76.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Lisa, you said, was 6 months old.
Yeah, Lisa was 6 months old.
How did it affect you?
I was as a twin brother. It was very upsetting. Again, we were very competitive. We were at odds all the time. I think one of the reasons was that when we were growing up, I was a little bit more social than he was. I thought I was required by my parents to bring Bob along when I was invited to a party because he was my identical twin brother.
Right.
So I took it, I didn't particularly care for that, but there's little I could do about that.
Tell the story about the time Mom mistook him for you.
Well, I think your mother should tell that story.
I'll tell that another time.
Yeah, just another time. But
How did you respond to marrying in person? If you're gonna do that, Mary, at least give her the microphone,
No,
Mary.
I don't want to be on TV.
Mary,
You just.
at least give her the microphone. She can't. We won't hear her at all. At least take the microphone.
yeah, just say a few words.
You don't turn it on me, though.
Okay, I won't turn you on.
You can put it on Don.
Right, yeah.
See his reaction.
Yeah, watch Don's reaction. I met Don. He was making out with the girl down the hall from me in our dormitory, and I thought he was very cute, and I wanted to make out with him. And a few months later, he broke up with this girl, but in the interim, she had introduced me to him and his brother, his twin. And then in December of '65 at Penn State University, I saw him at Hillel. And we folk danced together, and then it was Christmas vacation, and I sent a message to him through a mutual friend to tell him to have a very nice vacation, and he thought that was very, very nice of me. So when we came back from vacation in '66, he called me up and asked me for a date. And so, and then we started dating. But what happened is after, I guess it was the first night, was it? I guess I saw what I thought was him leaning over the water fountain at Hillel, taking a drink of water. And I went over to him and put my arm around him, and I said, I had such a wonderful night. And next thing I know, Don comes from behind me and says, "Don't ever make that mistake again." And so I thought that was very romantic, being only 19 years old. And then we were together, I guess maybe that was '65 we were together, yeah.
Yeah.
No. And, no, don't blur me. So we were together, and then I was staying at Penn State the summer of 1965, and he asked me if I'd feel better if we were engaged. And I said, yeah, I would. And he asked me to marry him then in the back of Hillel, in the backyard. And he said, don't tell anybody. And I immediately ran and called my mother. But in the interim, we had broken up because some of his friends told him they thought he was too young. And they felt that we were too young to be engaged because we were 19. You were 18 and a half, I think. And we got engaged without a ring. Always without a ring. Everything. I've already told them the story about the Howard Johnson's ring. And Bob, Don, and whoever Bob was dating at the time, and then eventually Diane Cohen, and before that, Nona. We all hung out together a lot. We did, and then we had a mutual friends, Donna and Marilyn Melman, and the six of us hung out together a lot. So we had a good time. We had a very nice time. Got along with Bob very well, and Diane and Nona, whoever he was dating. Yeah.
I just remembered who the girl was who said hello. Barbara Schwab. Remember
That's right,
him?
Barbara Schwab. That's right.
Yeah.
That's who I told to say hello to him.
Been married for a long time.
Yeah. Yes.
48 years is
48 years.
You're kidding.
Yep.
Oh my God. You guys getting older.
Aren't we that?
People, nobody thought this. Well, I wouldn't say that. Talk about your ex-girlfriend and what she said.
Oh, why do I talk about my ex-girlfriend?
What she said about you on your first date to me.
I have no idea. I don't recall.
There we go.
He had been going with this girl named Cheryl for a while, and then he broke up with her, and that's how I got to get together with him. And she saw him on his coming to pick me up at the dorm on our first date, and she said to him, "It'll never work." And yeah, and his parents didn't think it would work either. His sister didn't think it would work, and it did work. It did work. It's been a lot of It's been. We've had a lot of ups and downs, but we've kept going and going and going, and it's
only been 48 years.
it's only been 48. We want another 48 together. Here.
Now you give it back.
Okay. There you go. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
So Darryl, how about you?
How about me?
Well,
I
so,
didn't have a girlfriend that I chose me. I don't know, but give me a.
Tell us when you met Marianne.
you give him the mic.
Give him the mic.
Oh, I don't know. My friend Steve, who was noted in my history as being the guy who got a girl pregnant and then dropped her. He's a friend of mine, Steve, who was a friend then. And I would pal around in a car. We drive around to all the synagogues in the area because they have these things for the seniors in high school. And there's like little dances and stuff like this, get-togethers, where they could socialize. And so we had the schedule for everyone. We went to Rockville, we went to Roslyn and all the different places. And we went to Roslyn, and I saw Mary there, and I said, that's it. I just said, I really wasn't and chatted. I said, that's her. That's the one. Unfortunately, she was dating somebody else. And so I don't know what happened after that one. And then, but luckily, her mother had very strong feelings for me, which is by the way, they were strong negative feelings for me. When we were dating, Mary's mother would come by and hit me. Yeah, she did. She would come by and she'd hit me. She'd bump into me hard. I mean, really hard, because she didn't like me. And she said, and she'd tell Mary in my presence, that she really should be looking around and dating other people. She would do that. But luckily her father and I had a very good relationship, and so that was so. Her father and I got along very well together, so we sort of balanced that one
Kind
out.
of personality, which is probably why I felt.
Yeah. Anyway, that was the story of our relationships, and our marriage has lasted so far. But
How many years now?
let's see, we're married in 59, so it's
This summer will be
56
56.
56 years.
Do you feel like it?
Yeah. Yeah. I really feel like it. Yes, the answer is the first 50 was okay, but it's getting to be harder and harder and harder.
I noticed that you guys finish each other's sentences.
It's
And
worse.
interrupt each
Oh, it's
other.
worse than that. Our relationship is a very strange one to people that are not Mary and I. But when we were in Israel on this, Mary was singing for a chorale in Israel, and I was videotaping, and Mary would always be calling. What was it, Mary? Darry, where she'd be calling me as we walked down the. We were traversing all the different strong steps and little. She'd be calling me all the time. Anyway, everybody in the group would parrot the call that Mary had. Darryl, where are you, Darryl? And so pretty soon the whole group would say the same thing. Mary would say, Darryl, where are you? The whole group would chime in, Darryl, where are you? So we became famous that way. And so we've been through well, like you. It's been a lot of years. It's hard to say how to put it in one little envelope and say this is what we are. We were many things, and so
Right.
it depends. And there were ups and downs and ins and outs and fights and non-fights and loves and it was a lot of experiences in this thing. And having kids was an experience. Having a job was an experience. Doing things and going on vacation was an experience. And we bicycled and we did lots of stuff. So I don't know. There's so many dimensions to a person's to a relationship that's very hard to say it in an interview. So the answer is I don't know.
Donald, what do you think about our relationship? Repeat that first, and then say what I just said.
They don't hear it. They can't hear it.
I see. Sandy asked what I thought about our relationship, and I have to second Darryl's thoughts. It's been very long.
Now this is your first wife, right?
Yes. And because of my children, it'll be my only wife.
You're welcome, Mom.
Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you. Okay, so, and tell me a little bit about why did you choose to go into teaching?
Well, actually, the choice.
They didn't hear it. She's not-
Oh, the question is, why did I go into teaching? And the reason is, when I graduated from Penn State, I went off to Case Western Reserve to get a PhD in math. And unfortunately, it was the middle of the Vietnam War, and I had a student deferment, and Johnson, in his wisdom, ended all student deferments. So in order to stay out of the war, I had to get a job teaching. And so I was at Case, but they wouldn't hire. I thought of getting a job in the Cleveland area, but they wouldn't hire anyone because of if you were not a resident there, apparently, where that was to avoid the war.
Right.
So I had to come to Philadelphia to get a teaching job, and I taught for 6 years in Philadelphia. At the same time, I decided I wanted to go to law school. So I got into law school, and I went to law school at night, continued teaching, and I've stayed in it ever since.
Which one? Law school or teaching?
Teaching.
Oh, okay.
Teaching. I got 2 law degrees, but a lot of my friends who are attorneys spend a lot of time away from their home. And I wanted to spend time with my family. So I decided to stick with the teaching. I enjoyed that. I got a lot of satisfaction out of teaching. It was very frustrating with the law, and I thought I made the right decision. I hope I did.
How do you feel about being a draft dodger?
I have no problem with that. I was against the Vietnam War, and it was a terrible war to begin with.
I have a dichotomy with that one. I me too, as a draft dodger. I went to work at Bell. I'm an engineer, so went to work at Bell Labs, and I got a deferment because of my job. Of course, I wasn't working on anything really intelligent or military oriented, but I got a deferment on that job. But I almost didn't. I required in one of my jobs, I was required to get a top secret clearance. When you get a top secret clearance, they investigate your whole life, everywhere. Well, it turns out that my uncle, you may know him, Ike, was it? Ike?
Oh, yes, yes.
And Sam
Yes,
signed me up for a communist newspaper. that's no joke when you try to get top secret clearance. Okay? So I had to disavow the communist newspaper. Also, Mary and I would go to. Do you ever hear of Pete Seeger?
Oh yes, yes.
Well, Pete Seeger was sort of they thought of him as red. I don't know why. I mean, I never knew anything about his communist affiliations. But they asked me specifically, "Have you been to these kind of concerts?" Of course I did, but I was careful not to sign my name when they sign on at the thing. So I was able to get that. So anyway, I had this top secret clearance, but Mary and I were against the war. We had to resolve those two. So the way we resolved those two, we lived in D.C.
We lived in Maryland, so
We lived right in D.C., right near the demonstrations.
Would come to our house.
But Mary and I were against the war, but I was holding top secret clearance. So I would go down and demonstrate against the war, always wondering how long my top secret clearance would last. Considering I'm down there demonstrating against the war, and when I go back to work, I've got this thing that's top secret. Anyway, whatever. A really funny story about this one. We had a neighbor that worked for the Navy as a civilian. And we always said hello to him in the morning because we both go to work about
And
the same
his son
time.
was Jeffrey's best friend.
Jeffrey's son, yeah. Jeffrey's best friend was his son. So we got along with him very well. And he told me he's a civilian working for the Navy. Fine. In the meantime, I would go to work with my top secret clearance and my highly security, highly confidential job. In these meetings that we had that were confidential, the requirement is that they would tell everybody that came knew everybody else. You get the dossier of everybody that's in the meeting. So I would go to a meeting and I'd read who everybody was. Sam Jones. He's a general, whatever he is, and different people, the different titles. My neighbor's there. What is he doing at this meeting? It turns out he's undercover. My neighbor, who I thought was a civilian working for the Navy, is really an undercover agent for the Naval Security Agency.
God.
Oh God.
And I say,
Okay.
Naval
Security, Naval Intelligence. Anyway, so I said, okay. So, fast forward a couple of weeks. I'm getting ready to go down to demonstrate against the Vietnam War. Okay. I noticed my neighbor getting ready to leave also. So I say, hi, Marv. Well, I know where I'm going. Where are you going? He says, I'm going down there to take pictures of you guys. I said, you take a picture of me? He says, actually, no, because you're not important enough. And I sort of felt good and bad at the same time. I felt good that he wasn't going to take a picture of me and throw me out of my contract, but I felt badly that I wasn't important enough to get a picture taken of me. So anyway, that's the story.
That's quite a story. Quite a story.
Okay, to add something to that in terms of my father, it was not unusual in the early 50s. He was on the FBI would come to the front door, and my father would go out the back door.
God. Oh, God. Oh, great.
The 50s were terrible.
Yes. My parents, again, we were living in Philadelphia. A lot of their friends lost their jobs because of the McCarthy era, who were teachers in Philadelphia public school system. It was very sad.
I lost a teacher. When I was going to high school, one of my teachers had to quit because he wouldn't sign that. They had a document. People that were listening to this video may not have lived in this era, but they had to sign a pledge of, of allegiance?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, some sort of pledge that you support, whatever it is. I'm not sure what it is. You have to sign your life away saying that.
I've never
been a communist.
They never, yeah.
I've never been a communist. I never, whatever it is. Anyway. So
Was your father ever brought before the McCarthy hearings?
No. Not that I'm aware of. All I know is.
Say the question.
Oh, the question was my father ever brought before the FBI or the McCarthy? And no, I don't. They didn't catch him. No, I guess he wasn't important enough.
Touche.
But it's funny though. I mean, I know people will be watching this and know that this is ancient history.
Right.
But there was a bunch of organizations on this list, and some of them sounded very innocuous. Something I never heard of, like the Lincoln Brigade, anything to do with
And
the Spanish.
people don't realize the terror that was going on.
There were people being, you can't be heard, Mary. Mary's talking about, you can't be heard, Mary. But we're talking about the fact that people, the environment, everybody was frightened of losing their jobs. If you didn't sign this pledge, I forgot what the name, it's got a name for the,
But it was not
pledge.
only a sign. If they decided that you were,
Can't be heard. If they decided
had
that,
some friend who mentioned your name, that was
oh, yeah, that was the other one too. When you were called, when people were called up on McCarthy hearings, they were called up and they were asked about all the names of all their friends. And every friend became a suspect. And they were communists everywhere. They were covering communists everywhere in the government, in the military. I mean, they were looking everywhere for someone to expose.
Well, look how many people in the theater and the arts lost.
Oh,
lost
that was
The blackballing the theater
Oh
people.
my God.
I had a high school teacher that was thrown out of his work.
Committed suicide.
Yeah, it was a really terrible time.
Others moved to-
And that's the time. That was a rough time.
It's interesting because we got a TV in the early 50s, I guess it was 53, 54, and the first thing I remember seeing that my parents were watching was the Army McCarthy hearings.
Yes, and we
all
watched
watched
it
it
too. We were at the edge of our
We watched them
seat.
all. I watched.
Yeah.
They were really. They were hitting our people that my parents knew.
Sure.
It was a pretty big thing. Yeah, and I was in high school when that was at its peak.
Talking about high school, tell them how you felt being the child of your parents and what your ideology was in Northeast High School.
Yeah,
the question.
the question was, how did I feel when I was in high school because of my background and how I interacted with my high school friends? Well, if people know me fairly well, I didn't have many friends. I kept to myself a lot. I guess one of the reasons is that they didn't appreciate I was somewhat outspoken, and I had a reputation. My brother had a reputation for being leftist in that particular period of time, and I'm okay. And so I didn't have many friends, so it didn't really make that much difference to me. I had my own things that I did, and other friends who were outside did folk dancing with different groups.
Other communists.
Yeah, probably. Sure. That's who I palled around with. I did
Of course,
well.
that was later too. That wasn't right in that part of that.
No, this was again.
What
I was born in '45, so in '55 I was 10. I tried. I was only 10 years old at the
Right,
time. This is when I was in high school. I went to high school between '60 and '63, and at that time, I was very surprised. It's interesting. One of the most biggest surprises I had was when I was in ninth grade. I was nominated to be the president of my homeroom class. I figured I didn't have many friends. I spoke to a number of people, but I didn't think they were very close. They elected me president of my classroom. Of course, there were pictures. This goes later on. They had. I remember seeing a picture of me. They took pictures of the student council meetings, and I was probably half asleep most of the time, which is my reputation when I started teaching. I was known to take breaks when I had a free period to lie down and take a nap and get up right before the bell rang. So that was my reputation.
Impressed.
Very impressive.
I can tell you about communism. When I went to Brooklyn Polytech, and Polytech is New York City, of course. It's Brooklyn, and there were communists in the engineering school, but the engineers dealt with communism a little bit differently than you might think. They'd have a communist organizer, a young person, that would have a whole group of people surrounding him as he told us how the communists are going to save the world, and their world is better and our world is terrible, and every government is falling apart, and the communists are the way to go. And all the engineers, the students, would surround him and look at him and they'd ask questions and all that. And then suddenly someone said, there's a test tomorrow, and everybody would leave. They'd all leave. The priorities were not terribly political.
Well, talk about the basketball.
Oh yeah, we had a basketball team. The basketball team was doing we got a real basketball team, but if there was a test that day, nobody showed up at the basketball team. The team doesn't show up.
I love
They all-
That's the way it should be.
Well, it was a different world then. It was always a commuter, so I didn't really live there. Well, not that anybody else. They all were commuting, were subway commuters, and I drove in from Long Island to there, so I spent very little time there. So, but we were all just we took very well. I guess the requirements were 18 credits per semester to get through, and so that was a fairly heavy schedule, and there were almost no liberal arts courses. I mean, we weren't supposed to read. We basically learned only math and science and stuff like that. So I was almost would have been totally illiterate if it wasn't for Mary.
The liberal arts college stuff.
Oh yeah, but that's different. When Mary I was dating Mary, and she was in Cornell, which is a real school, and I wanted. We were still dating. We weren't engaged or anything. So I wanted to impress her. She'd come home from on vacation, and I'd read her books because I wanted to impress her. Those are the only books I ever read. I mean, but I read all these like Lolita and John Stuart Mills. I mean, I don't have any background in that, but thanks to Mary,
Okay,
got an education.
apropos to some of this conversation, you said you were in Brooklyn Polytech. Our cousin, Sandy's cousin, Barry, is an executive now. That's where a professor, an administrator at Brooklyn Polytech, who's now
Got
which is
brought
now
out
owned by
by
NYU. Yeah, he now works for NYU.
Right.
And as a result, his daughter, who's in the theater education school there at NYU, got a good discount.
Very good.
But also, was originally in my first year. I was in engineering at Penn State, engineering science. But I dropped out of that because it was all engineering courses and math courses.
Yes.
And I wanted a well-rounded education, so I dropped in, and I became a math major. That's why we.
You should have done is try dating someone from Cornell.
It's too late now.
Too late now, yeah.
I could try, but I don't think it'll work. Why did you hit me?
You dated somebody from York. That was more than
Yeah.
Because if you dated somebody who was from Cornell, they'd be young enough to be your granddaughter.
That's true. That's true.
Well,
Anything else more recent that you want to add?
more recent. Not at the moment. I can't think of something. We'll come up with something later.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's break the
Now-
dessert.
Yeah.
Repeat that first, and then say what I just said.
They don't hear it. They can't hear it.
I see. Sandy asked what I thought about our relationship, and I have to second Darryl's thoughts. It's been very long.
Thank you.
Now, this is your first wife, right?
Yes.